Good afternoon from Los Angeles. It's Alyssa Corum and Justin Nielsen here with a look at the stock market today. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Match Group and Beyond Meat, some bright spots in a pretty gloomy day.
Yes, exactly.
All right, well, let's talk about the major indexes. The sell-off was pretty harsh today. Strong losses across the board. We started off ugly, and it just got worse from there. The NASDAQ closing down about 3.4% for the day. The S&P 500 down 2.5%. The Dow down 2.3%. But with what we saw last week, at least around here, we've kind of been bracing for impact at this point.
Yes, absolutely. Because, with the trade war talk, we knew that, unless that gets resolved, there's no way that's going to be good. So now we got the expected retaliation from China, and that's caused a little bit more of a serious nature to this correction. Before we were just looking at pullback, and now that we've breached that 50-day moving average, and in a very serious way, this looks a lot more like what we call a vertical violation. And those vertical violations usually entail a more serious correction, like 10%, not your normal 3, 4, 5%. Normally like a 10%, and it usually takes a little bit of time to recover from that. So now that we've crossed that 50-day moving average, really the next stop on the NASDAQ at least is the 200-day line. And that's right down there at 7,500, and now you're starting to get closer to that 10% level. And again, it usually takes a little bit more time to recover from something like that.
Well, yeah, if you just pivot your attention to that left side of the chart there, seeing what we saw back in October, that was indeed a vertical violation as well. And we saw how that played out. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict, but we can use history to help give us some guidelines for what maybe we could expect.
Yeah, and there's a lot of history that we can look at. If you want to look at history in terms of trade wars and how that can affect the economy and the stock market, Paul Whitfield wrote a really great Investor's Corner. This is actually something we kind of repurposed to kind of keep in front of people's minds. Go back to 1930. And the Smoot-Hawley, and how that, how Hoover signed that into law, what happened with tariffs there, and it was reversed by Roosevelt. Again, not to get it too deep in the weeds, but if you want to talk history, there's plenty to look at there on how tariffs were affecting the 1930s. And it wasn't good. Let me just say that.
Yeah, well, history can repeat itself, so we'll just have to keep an eye right now. But like you said, next line in the sand, 7,500, that 200-day line. So we'll be keeping a close watch on where we go from here.
And in the same way that we were looking at that 8,000 level as, okay, that was support before, it became resistance. Now the 50-day line was support. That could be looking like resistance now too.
If we start heading back up. All right, good to know. Well, let's take a look at some individual names in Match Group. I mean, looking at this chart, it doesn't even look like we're in a sell-off right now, hitting new highs.
Yeah, and David Chung's note on this was make love, not trade war. And that's basically Match's take on this whole thing. So you had this, nice base that got formed, a little correction, a little pullback, so kind of a base on base, what we call a base on base. Those are great when you have a market that is kind of like in a correction and it's just fighting that trend. Now this is still fighting the downtrend of the market. And so whenever we see these pullbacks happen in the market, we like to see which stocks are holding up, and Match Group is definitely one of them.
That's right. I mean, if you look at that relative strength line, which is the blue line on the chart, that is pretty vertical in a good way.
Yes, right, exactly.
So signaling strong outperformance here. The only thing is though, if you were an investor who bought out of this base on base, what do you do now? I mean, it's not really flashing any sell signal yet, but market conditions are pretty poor.
Right, and so what we talked about at that point was that Match had its earnings coming up, and it was really hard to hold through those earnings because you didn't have any cushion if you bought out of that base on base.
Very true.
So now if you bought off of the earnings, now you're kind of in a situation where you're profitable, but with the market being the way it is, it's really hard to get too excited about holding on to growth names with the market weakness.
So despite all of that, if you still happen to be holding this, if you're up 16% from the buy point, there's nothing wrong with selling into strength, locking in those profits. You don't necessarily have to wait to that 20 to 25% level, especially given the conditions.
Yeah, I mean, usually the way I approach my portfolio is I'm going to start looking at the things that I'm down on and get rid of those first. That's the dead weight in my boat, and then I kind of move on to what things I want to take profits in. So that's the way I do it.
Perfect. Well, let's take a look at Beyond Meat, because handling IPOs is also something really important that we like to take a look at, and you never want to buy on the first day of trade. Beyond Meat had a really nice first few days of trade, and it's now consolidating and forming an IPO base.
Yeah, contrast this with something like Uber on Friday, right? So Uber's a great example of why we don't buy on the first day of trade. We want to see some trading history, but now for Beyond Meat, we do have some trading history, and in particular, what we're going to be looking for right here is an IPO base. So an IPO base can be as short as 7 days. It doesn't quite need the amount of time. 5
in some rare instances, according to Mike Webster.
Okay, very good. So, and he's the expert on it, so I'm not gonna dispute what he says.
Rare occasions.
But now we've got 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th day, so just keep that in mind. Now here again, the market, flashing its signals like it has been, makes me a little nervous of adding anything to my, portfolio right now, but I still want to keep my watch list fresh, and Beyond Meat is definitely something to keep your eyes on.
That it is, and it's not profitable. A lot of new IPOs are not, but we like to look at that strong sales growth, and we're definitely seeing that with Beyond Meat.
Yes, and David Chung wrote a really great IBD stock of the day on this, so definitely for more information, take a look at that.
That's right, our stock of the day today, so make sure you check that out. Ticker is BYND. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching today. And as always, you can check out more at investors.com and also across social media, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter, to stay up to date on all the latest, which is especially key right now. It's not time to just check out and go on summer vacation.
Especially because this is kind of a political event, so this could turn, it's very news driven, so this could turn very easily. So you have to be very aware of what's going on day to day.
That's right. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.